Novak Djokovic, the greatest tennis player of all time. Who am I kidding? That title goes to Roger Federer. However, Djokovic is the current world number one. And I'm sure you're aware of what happened earlier this month. He arrived in Australia to play the Australian Open. And to his surprise, he was denied entry because he was unvaccinated. So let's talk about this entire drama and about vaccines and mandates in general, shall we? Let's begin. Hi, my name's Pranav, you're watching Scienceisdope. So what happened with Djokovic? He arrived in Australia on the 5th of Jan to play the Australian Open, which starts on the 17th of Jan. He has an interview with the immigration officer, which starts all the drama. And the transcript of that interview was later provided in court. I'll leave a link to it down below. The interaction went something like this. Are you vaccinated?
No, I'm not.
Why?
Because I have a medical exemption.
For what?
Because I've had COVID before, twice, once in June 2020 and once in December last month. And I have all the necessary documents right here if you want to take a look.
Jesus, okay, calm down. Okay, I may have exaggerated the details of the exchange a little bit right there, but that's basically what happened. Djokovic claimed that he had a medical exemption from Tennis Australia to play in the tournament. Anyone who had recovered from COVID in the last 6 months was eligible to enter, apparently. But according to the border official, that wasn't a valid reason for a medical exemption. You either had to be fully vaccinated or have a valid medical reason why you can't be vaccinated. And since Djokovic had neither, his visa was cancelled and he was detained in an immigration hotel. We have a lot to talk about here. Was it ethically the right thing that Australia did to cancel his visa? Was Djokovic being irresponsible by trying to enter a country with strict vaccination rules while being unvaccinated? Are vaccine mandates like the ones needed to enter Australia are ethically the right thing to have? But before we get into all this, we have to look at the facts of the story first, because the story doesn't end there. Djokovic spends 4 nights in this immigration hotel, which apparently is not a great place to be. But during this time, his lawyers are able to challenge his visa cancellation in court. And on the 10th of Jan, the judge rules in favor of Djokovic, allowing him to enter the country. And he resumes practice for the tournament that's going to happen in a week. But the story doesn't end there either. On the 14th of Jan, Alex Hawke, Australia's immigration minister, uses his personal power to cancel Djokovic's visa once again, ending all chances of him defending his Australian Open title once and for all. Was this entire process fair to Djokovic? I mean, he was told by Tennis Australia that he would be given a medical exemption to play in the tournament, only for him to arrive in Australia and find out that the government doesn't consider recovery from COVID as a valid reason for a medical exemption from being vaccinated. And also there was this unfairness in the visa cancellation process where the entire fiasco with the border officials happened from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. at a time of day when Djokovic couldn't get help from anyone, and he wasn't given the time that he was promised initially to respond to the cancellation decision. And these events were cited in the initial court trial where the judge ruled in his favor. But if you step back for a moment and look at what how irresponsible Djokovic has been throughout this whole process, then you'd start questioning what the hell he was thinking. I'll provide a timeline below of the series of events that occurred throughout this story. You can see that Djokovic got his visa in November 2021, which means he would have had to apply for it before that date. How did he, being unvaccinated, expect to enter a country with such strict vaccination rules when he was applying for that visa? Remember, at this point he had gotten COVID only once, and that was in June 2020. Luckily for him, he contracted COVID in December 2021 and was able to try and use this to get a medical exemption from being vaccinated. So you have to ask, was he planning on luckily contracting COVID in December when he applied for that visa in November? This also brings up the question, why was he unvaccinated in the first place? Because Novak Djokovic is an adamant anti-vaxxer. In fact, the internet thinks his name should be No-Vax Djokovic. He's also pretty famously anti-science as well. Here's what he once had to say to his 10 million followers on Instagram.
I know some people that through that energetical transformation, through the power of prayer, through the power of of gratitude, they managed to turn the most toxic food or maybe most polluted water into the most healing water, because water reacts. And you know,
Water's
Japanese
alive.
scientists have proven that obviously in the experiment, that molecules of the water react to our emotions, to what is being said.
Apart from this, he's a great proponent of alternative medicine. He rejects modern science. He once delayed his elbow surgery so that he could try and heal naturally. His wife is a 5G causes COVID-19 conspiracy theorist. There's more that you can read in the links I've provided below. Let's come back to the recent events. There are allegations that he lied on his travel forms and that he forged his December COVID test results, which he submitted as evidence for why he should get a medical exemption. And that seems plausible given his vaccination stance and the fact that he couldn't have known he would contract COVID in December when he was applying for the visa in November. And even if he had tested positive, he was photographed at a public event during that time without a mask. He brushed that off in a statement saying he didn't know he was positive at that time. The test results only came a day later, apparently. And he also lied on his travel documentation, saying he hadn't traveled anywhere in the last 14 days. But there are photographs of him in Spain during this time. This he brushed off, saying it was his team that filled in the travel documents and they made an error. Djokovic just had a lot of blatant disregard for all the rules while still at the same time trying to appear sincere in his public statements. Also, the medical exemption that he tried to get, they are meant for people that can't be vaccinated, people whose immune systems cannot respond appropriately to the vaccines when given. People like the ones undergoing cancer therapy or getting an organ transplant, or people who have genetic conditions or severe allergies. It's not meant for a young and healthy individual. It's basically like someone who is so inconsiderate that they parked in the handicap parking spot saying they have a broken toe. It's like making a mockery of the people who genuinely can't take the vaccine. Basically, Djokovic thought that he could use his power and influence to get into Australia while being unvaccinated. In my opinion, Australia had every right to deport him, which is what they did. You might disagree with me, especially if you're a Djokovic fan. As a person of influence, as someone with such a huge following, Djokovic should have been more responsible. There are people that look up to him. The anti-vax movement sees him as a poster boy. If he was allowed to remain in Australia, that would have given strength to the anti-vax sentiment all over the world. And that was one of the reasons cited by Alex Hawke, Australia's immigration minister, who cancelled Djokovic's visa using his ministerial discretion. But is it ethical in the first place for countries to have strict entry rules and mandates regarding vaccines in place? Let's talk about it. This video is a little different from my usual content. I don't usually cover current events on my channel, but this one dealt with vaccines. And there are a lot of questions that people seem to ask regarding vaccines in the light of this whole Djokovic issue. And a lot of them come from misconceptions that people have regarding vaccines, and I thought I should address some of them. Firstly, what is the purpose of a vaccine? All vaccines introduce into the body a harmless or partial form of the pathogen that causes the disease, so that the body has an immune reaction towards it. The immune system not only clears this pathogen but also learns to recognize it. In other words, it develops a kind of immunologic memory so that if it ever encounters this pathogen again, it can very quickly and efficiently prepare an immune response. So what the vaccine does is it primes your body against the disease before you ever get the actual disease. But if you're unvaccinated and you get the disease, then that's the first time your immune system is seeing that pathogen, and you're going to have a much harder time fighting it off, and possibly a more severe disease, because your immune system has to start this entire process from scratch. I'm sure most of you already know what vaccines do, but why do we need vaccines to be made mandatory? Shouldn't it be my personal choice whether I get vaccinated or not? I'm all for personal choice, but when your personal choice starts affecting the people around you, then is it really your personal choice anymore? I mean, you can choose to get drunk and drive around in your car, but if there are other people on the road, then It's not your personal choice anymore, is it? There should be laws to protect these people. The same way, if a percentage of population remains unvaccinated, then they are allowing the virus to spread through them more easily, and if the virus keeps replicating, then there are more chances that it can replicate into a form, it can mutate into a form that can evade the vaccine. And once that happens, the whole population becomes free game for that variant. And we see that happening with COVID-19. The vaccine gets less and less effective with each new variant. And also this now becomes a new talking point for the anti-vaxxer. Oh, if the vaccine is not effective against the new variant, then what's the use of the vaccine in the first place? One reason why we have variants is because you didn't vaccinate. And the vaccine is not ineffective against these new variants, just that the efficacy has been reduced. If you are vaccinated, you still have more protection against these variants than someone who is unvaccinated. There's also the misconception that vaccines are meant solely to protect the individual from the disease. While they do offer individual protection, vaccines are only effective when the whole population gets vaccinated. Just a couple of anti-vaxxers was all that was needed to increase the cases of measles in the population. To understand why vaccines are not just an individual protection measure but also a societal protection measure, watch this video linked down below. It shows how the virus spreads through society with the analogy of mousetraps. When the whole population is unvaccinated, a single trigger is all that's needed to trigger all the mousetraps in a chain reaction, and the whole population soon gets decimated. However, if enough individuals in the population are vaccinated, then a single stimulus can never produce such a chain reaction. Thus, the virus is unlikely to spread through the whole society.
Interestingly, we still had a couple of little hot spots, but the herd was immune.
When a minimum number of individuals in a population become immune to the virus so that this kind of chain infection cannot happen in that population, then we say that the population has reached herd immunity. And if you understand this idea, then you'll be able to clear out this misconception as well. People think that the efficacy of a vaccine matters. It doesn't. That's because the lower the efficacy of the vaccine, then the higher the percentage of the population that needs to be vaccinated to reach herd immunity. There are, of course, other factors also, like how contagious is this infection and how fast does the virus or pathogen mutate into new variants. But if a vaccine has only 50% efficacy, I'd still take it, because it's not the individual protection that the vaccine offers alone that matters, but whether that vaccine allows the whole population to reach herd immunity. Now, this idea of reaching herd immunity is very simple for a virus that doesn't really change or mutate much, but it's very challenging for a disease like COVID for people to reach herd immunity, because every few months we have a new variant. But the vaccines available today still help reduce hospitalizations and death, and by getting vaccinated, you're also helping those around you that can't get vaccinated. And I feel that's one more thing among others that's missing in anti-vaxxer arguments. You have to think about society, and most anti-vaxxers don't seem to grasp this concept of probability and efficacy and herd immunity. All they think about is the individual protection that the vaccine offers, and hence many of these misconceptions. And no matter how much we try to convince them, they're just gonna think that we have been paid by the vaccine mafia, or we have gotten brainwashed and we are trying to get them to believe what we do. That's not true. We've seen the science of how these work. We understand its mechanism, but saying all that to an anti-vaxxer is like talking to a wall. So what's the way around people like these? Vaccine mandates. The first thing about mandatory vaccinations is that they are not forced vaccinations. Nobody is going to hold you down and jab you with a syringe and vaccinate you without your consent. Instead, these mandates are always rules to prevent you from mingling with society. You may be barred from your workplace, you may not be allowed into buildings like shopping malls or pubs, and in some cases like Djokovic, you may be barred from entering a country. And if you are Djokovic, you have to think about what's more important to you. Remaining unvaccinated or defending your Australian Open title. You can't have both. I think this is a perfect way of mandating vaccines. If you don't think so, let me know why. And there's another question that comes up here about discrimination. Aren't we discriminating people based on their vaccination status? This is how I look at it: discrimination of people based on things out of their control, things like gender, race, caste, sexual orientation. This kind of discrimination must not be tolerated, but discriminating an individual based on something they do have control over, I'd say that's justified. I'll give you an example. Discriminating against criminals by putting them in prison is justified, right? Because they're being discriminated against based on their conscious action, the crime which they had conscious control over. A person's vaccination status is also something they do have control over, which is why I think vaccine mandates are justified. If you disagree, let me know why. I also want to say, because this is the internet and people love to take words out of context, I'm not saying that someone who is unvaccinated is a criminal. I'm just giving you another example of discrimination which is justified. Lastly, what if you're someone who doesn't trust the vaccine? What if you think that the government is mandating something that they don't have enough evidence for? If that were true, I would side with you. I would go against the government. But that isn't true. There is a wealth of information that point to the fact that these vaccines work. And if you don't trust the studies done by the manufacturers of these vaccines, then there are tons of independent studies that analyze these vaccines, and there are tons of data that indicate that these vaccines are effective. Of course, I'm not saying there are no risks to taking the vaccine. There are. But the benefits of taking this vaccine far outweighs the risks. I also understand that there are certain age groups for which we don't have enough vaccination data, and that there are certain individuals who have medical contraindications. But if you're an average healthy adult, there's no reason why you shouldn't take the vaccine. So not only for your sake, but for everyone's sake, please do. This video was made with the help of immunologist Dr. Libin Abraham. So I want to thank him for all the help he gave me, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, remember, science is dope.